not too close to the border. So there's a lot to get into with all of this. Joining me now is Melanie Mason, senior political reporter at Politico here in California, and Peter Hamby, a founding partner at Puck News and host of Snapchat's Good Luck America. Welcome back to you both. A lot going on. Let's start there with Greg Bovino. What do you make of that video, Peter?
I don't know what to make of it. My first thought was he's in Minneapolis. He gets relieved of his duties. He's coming back to California. Is he taking like a cathartic solo road trip across the country and just pull over? This won't be the last we see of Greg Bovino, though. I think there will be investigations into both shootings. Maybe he'll get called to testify on Capitol Hill by some Senate or House Oversight Committee. He has been relieved of his duties. Bizarre video. We should note that's Kristi Noem's home state, South Dakota.
It is Kristi Noem's home state. And it is clear, Melanie, that both Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino have at least been temporarily demoted in a very public way. President Trump not happy with them.
I mean, just look at the body language that we saw from that clip from Secretary Noem tonight on Fox News speaking to Sean Hannity. I mean, her body language was just so different from what we've seen over these last couple of days. And I think that's because she's been chastened. I think she really kind of got out over her skis in the narrative that she and other members of the administration were trying to lay out. And clearly the blowback has been focused primarily on her, primarily on Greg Bovino. And she seemed a little rattled, quite frankly, by what she's gone through over the last couple of days.
And as we know, Peter, being bad on TV is not good for Donald Trump.
No, and by the way, Kristi Noem has, one of the reasons I think Donald Trump likes her and has liked her in the past is she is good on TV. She is telegenic. She cares about that very much. But I didn't know, Elex, until tonight that she went on Hannity. Given Donald Trump's posture toward her today and his behavior in the cabinet meeting, where he didn't take questions, as you pointed out, he wanted to talk about anything other than immigration. He talked about housing. He talked about energy. He talked today about an addiction initiative that they're launching at the White House. At one point, he looked toward Kristi Noem, didn't acknowledge her at all. Remember when Pete Hegseth was under fire for that group chat on Signal? He brought him into a cabinet meeting and said, you know, we're still with this guy. Right. That was the expectation, I think, that going into this meeting, that he would defend her. Back to the Fox thing, though, I am surprised that she went on Fox tonight. And I'm curious if the White House pushed that or if she herself is doing her own damage control and trying to get her voice out there today and get into the news cycle because she was completely erased from it today.
And it also seems that because of some of those statements on immigration, Republicans lost a little bit of the narrative, which lost some leverage on these shutdown negotiations. What do you make of where we're at right now in terms of this government shutdown, and what should we expect 24 hours from now?
Well, no one's going to make any predictions, particularly when it comes to the U.S. Senate. But look, what we're hearing from President Trump about this potential shutdown or likely shutdown versus what we heard about the prior shutdown, the tone could not be more different. I mean, he kind of took the posture before of like, I'm going to sit back and let you guys wait it out. And then there was a point where I think it became clear that Democrats weren't suffering as much politically as perhaps he had expected. Mm-hmm. This time, that doesn't seem to be the case at all. If anything, he's out ahead of Senate Republicans urging for a deal. And, you know, I think, of course, you know, President Trump likes to say he's the art of the deal guy, but I think a lot of times he doesn't necessarily want to be the one that is first at the table. Mm. This is an interesting position for him to take.
I mean, do you think a deal gets done?
Yeah, I do. Like you mentioned, I think the House has to come back and vote probably Monday. I think we get in political media twisted up by shutdown politics sometimes. The last shutdown was a big deal, the longest in history. The government will probably be open next week or partially shut down. What's interesting to me is the larger backdrop of what we're talking about, which is Donald Trump and John Thune saying admitting basically we have a problem here on immigration and ICE, and we need to negotiate with Democrats here. People are all in. Even Lindsey Graham today tweeted, I've got problems with DHS. We need to address masks. We need to address body cameras. We need to address investigating ICE officers who are alleged to have done misconduct. That's interesting to me, too. But what's going to be very interesting is once they get past this shutdown fight, there's going to be a couple-week window, I think, where Democrats and Republicans are going to be negotiating over these reforms to ICE. And that's going to be a pretty high wattage debate over a pretty narrow 2-week window. And I think that's what's more interesting than will the government be shut down on Monday or Tuesday.
And speaking of that, Lindsey Graham sort of made some news tonight on what he wants to do during that 2-week window. Here's him on Fox News Channel.
I don't mind trying to make ICE better. I don't mind having some reasonable reforms and learning from the mistakes. But here's what I'm telling my Democratic friends. That's a Band-Aid. The cancer is the sanctuary city policy adopted by 12 states that creates chaos for the rest of the 38. Yeah. So here's some news. I just concluded a deal with the White House to come up with a sanctuary city bill that would end sanctuary city policy forever. How? I will make it a federal crime for a state or local official to defy federal law on immigration.
So interesting. So let's just define what sanctuary policy is for people that may not keep track of it. It's in place here in California. It's in place in Minnesota. Basically, it's the state or the city saying we are not going to cooperate with the federal government when it comes to federal immigration. They say the law doesn't require cooperation from local. They're not saying we're going to get in the way, just we're not going to cooperate.
Right. They're saying it's federal law, so federal agents can enforce it, and that they are going to focus on state law or local law. I think the thing that's interesting about this seems to be the talking point that the Republicans are galvanizing around. And I think that there's an intuitive sense to that, right? Because I think that you're able to, most people would say, like, yeah, if we're talking about targeting the most dangerous people, then why isn't local law enforcement cooperating? I think the thing that's worth remembering, though, is that sanctuary policies are not new to this Trump 2.0. I mean, some of them have been in place for decades. And so when the conversation is happening about why these particular ICE enforcements seem to be so chaotic compared to what we've seen in the past, it's not like the sanctuary city policies are brand new. In a lot of cases, places like here in Los Angeles, that's been sort of the way that we've operated for decades now. And so it's a great talking point. I think when you scratch the surface, factually, it gets a little iffy.
Yeah. I mean, stepping back, looking at polls, most voters, when they look at what's happening in Minneapolis or Los Angeles or Chicago, blame ICE agents being there for causing the violence and disruptions, primarily, the number one cause. But I actually think this is a smart tactic by Republicans and Lindsey Graham. If you look at polling, Democrats have the edge right now on masks. A majority of people actually support removing masks from ICE agents. 90% of voters, according to YouGov, think ICE agents should be wearing body cameras. They support investigations into misconduct, extending their training period by huge majorities. But most voters, and Melanie's right, depends on how you phrase the poll question, but most voters actually oppose local officials interrupting federal law enforcement, federal immigration officials coming in and blocking immigration enforcement. So Lindsey Graham, I think, has that on his side. I think a lot of Americans oppose sanctuary city policies in the broadest sense. Polls show that. Right. Again, you can slice and dice it, but that's an interesting, it'll be an interesting bargaining tactic, I think. And
a lot of immigration folks are very frustrated that they can't work behind bars with a lot of folks, and they say that's part of the reason they have to go out into the streets. Here in California, you're one of the main go-to people when it comes to California politics. We had a big breaking news story today in that space, which is that Matt Mahan, the mayor of San Jose, is running for governor. For folks watching around the world that may not be that familiar with Matt Mahan, who is he and why does that matter?
So Matt Mahan is the mayor of San Jose, California, the heart of Silicon Valley. And he's an up-and-comer in the Democratic Party. He's very telegenic. He's very well-spoken. He's carved out an interesting lane for himself within the party, which is, less focused on the red meat base, talking about Trump, more focused on things like tough on homelessness, supporting things like Prop 36, which was a tough on crime measure that voters in California approved last year. And so I think that he
criticizing Gavin Newsom, who could be the Democratic nominee in a very public way that almost nobody else is doing.
That's right. I mean, he is absolutely to Newsom's right. And so I think that the question, both for Californians and then more broadly, is like, is there a lane for that in the Democratic Party right now writ large? Like, where is the energy? Is the energy for sort of the resistance folks, the folks that are going up against Trump? Or is the energy for the, so-called back to basics folks that want to talk about quality of life and affordability and homelessness?
And there's so many candidates in the governor's race already, but he saw a lane for himself, especially when Rick Caruso, who was an entrepreneur, similar politics, decided not to run.
I think this is why he ran. There is a lane. I think he's right.
And Caruso's already basically endorsed him.
Basically, and by the way, that's good for Matt Mahan because he's, San Jose is the third biggest city in the state. It's some 2 million people. You guys know better than me, live there. But he doesn't have a profile down in this part of California, so Rick Caruso can walk around town and introduce him to people. But going back to the polls, it is just wide open, and I think there is a hunger from Democrats for someone who feels, with all due respect to the Democratic candidates, serious, like who can raise a lot of money, who can offer plans to fix affordability in the state, housing in the state, homelessness in the state. Because if you look at some of the advertising, some of the messaging from the candidates who are running, they're doing what Melanie is talking about. It's just the throw mud at Donald Trump, the resistance Democrats, and no one's breaking through with a message about expanding the housing supply, abundance.
Yeah.
That he's going to be the abundance guy in the race. Shout out Ezra Klein. So, and by the way, he'll be able to raise a ton of money, and that's very important coming out of Silicon Valley.
We will see. Melanie, Peter, thank you very much. And we will hear his message next hour when Matt Mahan joins us live for his first national TV interview